गोपीनाथ श्री राधे जय प्रभुपादा जय प्रभुपादा जय प्रभुपादा जय प्रभुपादा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा जय नित्य लीला प्रविष्ट ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर शत श्री श्रीमद् भाय चरणारविंद भक्तिवेदांत स्वामी श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय नित्य लीला प्रविष्ट ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर शत श्री श्रीमद् भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती ठाकुर श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय नित्य लीला प्रविष्ट ओम विष्णुपाद श्रील गौर किशोर दास बाबा जी महाराज की जय नित्य लीला प्रविष्ट ओम विष्णुपाद श्रील सच्चिदानंद भक्तिविनोद ठाकुर की जय नित्य लीला प्रविष्ट ओम विष्णुपाद श्रील वैष्णव सार्वभौम श्रील जगन्नाथ दास बाबू जी महाराज की जय श्री गौरीय वैष्णव गुरुवर्ग की जय नमाचार्य श्रील हरिदास ठाकुर की जय प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्री वसति गौर भक्त वृंद की जय गंगा माई की जय जमुना माई की जय भक्ति देवी की जय तुलसी देवी की जय अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि बोल all glory assemblies Hare Krishna all glory assemblies Hare Krishna all glory assemblies Hare Krishna all glory Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga all glory Srila Prabhupada की जय नमो विष्णु Prabhu, if possible, could I get Bhagavatam? No. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So reading from Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 9, Text 46. Yaduttaham tvayo prishto vairajat purushadidam yathasit tad upakyaste Prashnananyanscha Krishnisaha Yadutaham tvaya prishto Vairajat purushadidam Yathasi tad upakyaste Prashnan anyanscha kritsnashaha Yadutaham tvaya prishto Vairajat purushadidam Yathasi tadupakyaste Prashnan anyanscha kritsnasaha Yadutahan tvaya prishto Vairajat purushadidam Yatha sita dupakyaste Prashnananyanscha kritsnashaha Yadutaham tvaya prishto Vairajat purushadidam Yata sita dupakyaste Prashnananyanscha kritsnashaha Yat, what? Uta is, however. Aham, I. Tvaya, by you. Prishtaha, I am asked. Vairajat, from the universal form. Purushat, from the personality of Godhead. Idam, this world. Yatha, as it. Asit, was. Tat, that. Upakyaste, I shall explain. Prashnan, all the questions. Anyan, others. Cha, as well as. Kritsnashaha, in great detail. Translation. O King, your questions as to how the universe became manifested from the gigantic form of the personality of Godhead, as well as other questions, I shall answer in detail by explanation of the 4 verses already mentioned. Purport. As stated in the beginning of the Srimad Bhagavatam, this great transcendental literature is the ripened fruit of the tree of Vedic knowledge, and therefore all questions that can be humanly possible regarding the universal affairs, beginning from its creation, are all answered in the Srimad Bhagavatam. The answers depend only on the qualification of the person who explains them. The 10 divisions of Srimad Bhagavatam, as explained by the great speaker Srila Shukadev Goswami, are the limitation of all questions, and intelligent persons will derive all intellectual benefits from them by proper utilization. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 2nd Canto, 9th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Answers by citing the Lord's version. And again the translation. O King, your questions as to how the universe became manifested from the gigantic form of the personality of Godhead, as well as other questions, I shall answer in detail by explanation of the 4 verses already mentioned. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupah Kadamahyam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gourangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gauratvishe Namaha Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripasindhubhyaevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So, today we are concluding the 9th chapter of the 2nd canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Of course, this 9th chapter is very esteemed, is very valued by Vaishnavas because it contains that great Chatur Shloki. And we're finding in the text today that we're going to hear an elaboration on this Chatur Shloki. We're going to hear further delving into over the next chapter, the 10th chapter. So really, in many ways, the 2nd chapter, the 2nd canto, is very much about the Srimad Bhagavatam. This is why cantos 1 and 2, they're often treated as a prelude, a prologue to the Srimad Bhagavatam. Because canto 1 is speaking about the Bhagavatam being spoken in its very ripe, complete form that Shukadeva Goswami speaks. And 2nd canto is more about the origins of this Bhagavatam. Of course, we hear about many other things. We hear about the universal form. We hear something about creation. We hear all these other details. But the essence of these cantos of Bhagavatam is Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam itself. The story, the pastime, the history, in fact, of how the Bhagavatam came to be in its seed form and then in its fully flourished form are all narrated in these first 2 cantos. And because of this, some rascals sometimes will say these first 2 cantos of Bhagavatam are not Bhagavatam themselves. They'll say, oh, actually these first 2 cantos, they're the prologue. The real Bhagavatam begins in 3rd canto. Or some will go so far to say the real Bhagavatam begins in 10th canto and everything else is just a prologue. But this is rejected by our acharyas. Srila Sanatana Goswami or Jiva Goswami, now I'm forgetting. They write in their commentaries that this authoritative Bhagavatam is authoritative from every single word, from Janmadhyasya to the very final. Actually, he quotes the 2nd final text. So the manuscript of Bhagavatam he was using did not have the final text that we have in the BVT edition. But some slight manuscript variation is there, but nothing major. Still, that is sending quite clearly the message that from Canto 1 all the way to Canto 12, this is the authoritative Srimad Bhagavatam. And how could it not be? How foolish one person can be to say, oh, this 2nd canto is not Bhagavatam, when the Chatur Shloki is in here. The entirety of the Bhagavatam is contained within the pages of the 2nd canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. How foolish then it would be to say that 2nd canto is not Bhagavatam, when in the 2nd canto we find the entirety of the Bhagavatam. In a condensed form, yes, but I often like to make the point that Srila Prabhupada says that Krishna can be both the smallest of the small and the largest of the large, and yet he is always the transcendental supreme personality of Godhead. In the same way, the Srimad Bhagavatam at times is thousands and thousands of verses long, and then it is larger than the most large. In the heavenly planets, how large is the Bhagavad Purana there? And yet we find here that it is 4 texts short. It is only the length of 4 shloks. Even Ishopanishad, Upadeshamrita, the small books we call them, or even the really, really small books, like On the Way to Krishna, they will have more length in terms of shloks quoted, and yet it is still the transcendental, supreme Srimad Bhagavatam in all of its potencies and characteristics. So we should not understand that these first 2 cantos are anything less. So what is then being said here? This text is a very interesting text because sometimes we forget that Bhagavatam is in many ways a conversation. It is a back and forth. Maybe not so much a conversation as we normally know of Prajalpa, but a conversation of the passing down of transcendental knowledge. We know the very famous text of I'm forgetting, Bhagavad Gita. It's pay your respects, ask questions, respectfully, and then, tatvidhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya. We know these are the 3 steps. So here we find, very nicely, we find pranipatena in Srimad Bhagavatam. We find it so nicely, how many prayers are being offered, even at the beginning, janmadhyasya. But then we also find, the sages at Naimisharanya, they spend so much time just glorifying Sutta Goswami. And then, of course, Shukadev as well. We find so many prayers glorifying all of the speakers. How wonderfully has Narad Muni glorified Brahma. So we find this, pranipatena, approaching respectfully, with pranams, with glorifying words. And this is the appropriate way to hear Srimad Bhagavatam, to obtain transcendental knowledge. But then after that, now we are finding pariprashnena. The sevaya is a little harder to find here, but just by listening to Srimad Bhagavatam, this is a seva. Just hearing Srimad Bhagavatam is seva. Of course, we should hope that it is not our only seva, especially in ISKCON, who will chop the vegetables, who will sweep the floor, if we spend all our time listening to Srimad Bhagavatam. But that doesn't mean any less that listening to Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam is not seva. Nityam Bhagavata sevaya. And actually, practically speaking, chopping the vegetables, sweeping the floor, is also studying the Bhagavatam. We should not think that the hearing of the Bhagavatam is contained only to hearing the words. There's Shravanam, there's Mananam, and then there's Nididhyasanam. Mananam, when we ponder on these things, and Nididhyasanam, when we realize them, can only be done by practically living out and applying the message of the Bhagavat. Srimad Bhagavatam is not just the words, but it is the devotional attitude which we realize in our lives. We speak about the book Bhagavat and the person Bhagavat, and we speak about them as sources of knowledge. But we should also understand that they are there for something for us to aspire to. We not only hear from the person Bhagavat to understand the book Bhagavat, but we understand the book Bhagavat that we can aim to become person Bhagavats. So this must be implemented. So this is how seva is present. It's present in all of the seva we do when implementing the hearing of Bhagavatam, but it is also in the very act of relishing Srimad Bhagavatam, speaking or listening, where everyone is serving Bhagavatam. Often we find in talks today, it is all about the speaker. The speaker is doing this, he's doing that, and then all the listeners, they're passive. But ordinary talks are not discussions on Srimad Bhagavatam. They're not Srimad Bhagavat Katha. When we listen to Krishna Katha, the speaker and the listener are on an equal platform. One is not greater than the other. Who is greater? The Katha itself, Bhagavatam itself. Both are acting in a lower level of service to the Bhagavatam itself. So even listening is an act of service, and it must be. We know in third canto, I'm very excited for third canto. It's going to be very intense. Third canto is very intense with the description of sciences and all. And we're going to hear about the nature of Vedic sound. And there's an interesting thing about the Vedic conception of sound. Because we hear that there must be a listener in order for the sound to be there. They can't just be a speaker. Sound becomes sound when there's both speaker and listener, which makes sense. It's an often posed riddle. Are the trees silent if they fall down in the forest with no one to hear? And in the Vedic conception, we'd say, yes, they're very silent. And so it is the same with the Bhagavat. So this is why it is seva, to hear or to speak, because in both, without either one, the Bhagavat, the speaking of Bhagavatam cannot happen. Anyway, so those two aspects are there, but the one we can see the most obviously is pariprashna, from pariprashnena, the asking respectfully of questions. And we'll find it throughout Bhagavatam. Sometimes it's the sages at Naimisharanya asking Sutta Goswami. Other times it's Parikshit Maharaj asking Shukadev. Other times it's Vidura asking Maitreya. Like this, it's going back and forth, back and forth. And we'll find conversations within conversations, within conversations. And so here we're finding one being asked, we're finding an answer to a question. And what is the answer? Your questions as to how the universe became manifested from the gigantic form of the personality of Godhead, as well as other questions, I shall answer in detail. Well, when was this question asked? Sometimes we'll think the question comes immediately afterwards, but sometimes it takes people a while to, or immediately before, but sometimes it takes people a while to get around to the answer. Actually, the question that is being answered here was asked in chapter 8 of this canto, text 11. What do we find there? Satchapi yatra purusho vishvastityudbhavapyayaha muktvatma maya mayeshaha shete sarva guhashayaha. He asks, please also explain the personality of Godhead who lies in every heart as a supersoul. Oh no, sorry, wrong text. 11. Yeah. Purush, that's why I was rusty, I was practicing. Purushāvāya vairlokaha sappāla purvakalpitaha lokairamushyavavyaha sappālair iti shushrumaha. O learned Brahmana, it was formerly explained that all the planets of the universe with their respective governors are situated in the different parts of the gigantic body of the Virat Purush. I have also heard that the different planetary systems are supposed to be in the gigantic body of the Virat Purush. But what is their actual position? Will you explain that? And there's obviously other questions as I read out. So there's many other questions that are also being answered. But so all of these questions are now being answered as what? As an elaboration on the 4 verses already mentioned. As an elaboration of the Chaturshloki. And this is the nature of the Bhagavatam. This is the nature of that transcendental knowledge of the Bhagavatam. It is constantly being expanded out. And this expansion that we're seeing is very interesting, is very exciting. Because this expansion of the Bhagavatam is the first few links of our parampara chain. Our Bhagavat parampara, as Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur described it, is a series of links, and they begin with Brahma, and then Brahma speaking to Narad, and then Narad speaking to Vyasadeva, and then of course it's Vyasadeva speaking to Madhva. But in this, they are speaking the various levels of Bhagavat, level after level after level. So it's very exciting, and as I mentioned before, even though this is a further exploration, even though this is a further elaboration, still it is equal in potency to the 4 shlokas. And so this is, we can see the parampara in action. And very naturally the Bhagavatam, even if it is not expanded in terms of shlokas, it is always explained out in different ways by all of the links in the parampara going forth. We know Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he wrote a commentary on Bhagavatam in Bengali. So many of our great acharyas have written so many commentaries on Bhagavatam in order to continue this active parampara, to deliver the message of the Bhagavat Mahapurana to all people. We know famously Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he has written a commentary. But not just Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. Sanatana Goswami has written a beautiful Vaishnav Toshani Tika. Very, very nice. Then Jiva Goswami, he has written the Krama Sandarbha, which is mainly the comments of his Sat Sandarbhas, elaborated out into a commentary. So it's the reverse. Normally if you read the Sat Sandarbhas, he'll have one topic, and he'll pull all of these texts from Bhagavatam to prove to the philosophy of Mahaprabhu. But the Krama Sandarbha is opposite. So for each text of Bhagavatam, he'll pull all of the points of philosophy that can be proved from it. Like this. So many of our acharyas have written Such wonderful commentaries on Bhagavatam. And in history, Bhagavatam has had so many commentaries. Around 70 is what some scholars estimate. If we take this in light of the fact that most Puranas don't get a commentary at all, this is very impressive. So, then of course our Srila Prabhupada has written such a potent commentary as well. His purports are so profound. In fact, I often think this whenever I give Bhagavatam class. Sometimes when I read the text the night before, I think, oh, I could talk about this, I could talk about that. And then I sit down, and even when I'm reading out the purport, as we're all listening together, I'll find more points and more points that I didn't realize before. Srila Prabhupada's purports are so deep. And so were all the other previous acharyas. But Srila Prabhupada's purports are especially deep for us, because they're written for us. They are written with the intent purpose for ISKCON devotees to delve into. And so they've been empowered by Srila Prabhupada in order to provide so much depth, so much realization. And again, this is the nature by which we must hear Bhagavatam. We should not hear Bhagavatam, we should not just read it. We should not try to approach it in this way. This is foolishness. We cannot, just by dissecting the syllables with a dictionary and a grammar, try to understand this Bhagavatam. Srila Prabhupada, he says that if one studies the Bhagavatam without the association of the devotees, he will become a Mayavadi. We must understand this Bhagavatam in the way that we are seeing the Bhagavatam itself is showing the way the Bhagavatam is being understood. Again, this is the complete nature of the Bhagavatam. Srila Prabhupada says, all knowledge that we could ever possibly want is found in the pages of Bhagavatam. And so Bhagavatam itself is showing us. What is it showing us? It is showing us how to understand Bhagavatam. Again, through the questions and through the answers of Guru and Shishya and disciple. And again, this must be done. There is a very wonderful story in the Mahabharata of Yavakrita. Yavakrita was a Brahmin, or at least a Dvija Bandhu, a friend of the twice-born. He was born in a Brahminical family, but he didn't really want to go to Gurukul. He was very lazy. Nowadays we see something similar. We find the slackers. They just, rather than going to university or getting into a trade, or going to Gurukul, or going to the ashram or anything, what do? They stay home, smoke marijuana, and play video games. We'll find like this. They don't want to go or do anything, just not do anything. So he was a bit like this. He didn't really want to do anything. He definitely didn't want to go to Gurukul. So he just spent his time doing who knows what. Very much just having a fun time. And then as he grew a little older, he began to realize, well, actually, I'm a Brahmin. I'm not a Shudra. I'm not physically capable of laboring in the fields. But in order to do Brahminical work, well, I had to have gone to Gurukul. So he thinks, okay, he looks into all the Gurukuls that are available to him, looks at all the enrollment forms, looks at all of the admission criteria, and he thinks, well, I could get access to quite a few of these Gurukuls. And I could be taught by a Guru, and therefore I would no longer be a Dvija Bandhu, but I would become a proper Dvija, a proper Brahmin, and then I'll be able to execute my Brahminical duties and be able to provide for myself and also have some work. He had a change of heart. But his heart wasn't changed enough. He still had some ego there. And he thought, but I don't want to be taught. All the other kids, they'll be so young, and I'll be a senior student. I'll be one of the older students. We find at universities, often there's students who are maybe 40, maybe 50, even some who are 60. And that's all very well and good. Most of them have the humility to think, well, this is fine, but Yavakrita did not. So Yavakrita thought, I can't do this then. Sure, I can't go to a Gurukul. I'll be so embarrassing. Everyone will be decades younger than me. So he thought then. And he thought, well, I'm in a Brahminical family, and so I know a thing or two, and I remember my father telling me, I remember him telling me that by austerity, one can get whatever they want. Austerities, Brahma, at the beginning of the universe, he performed so much great austerity, and then he was able to receive Bhagavatam. That is good. I will go to the forest, and I will perform intense austerity. And after performing intense austerity, then what will happen? Then I will receive the knowledge, and I will be able to, with this spiritual knowledge, be a Brahmin, execute my brahminical duties. So he goes off into the forest, and via intense penance, for years, he eats nothing but roots. He does all sorts of things. He's fasting, standing on one leg. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, often to chastise the Ashtanga yogis, he would say, it is not by the pinching of the nose that one receives transcendental knowledge, but by the pinching of his nose, Yavakrita attempted to obtain transcendental knowledge. And so years went past like this, and he was very seriously performing his austerities, hoping that one day he will receive this transcendental knowledge. Because why not? Well, everything can be achieved through austerities. So, while doing this, he continued to execute, and every morning he would go to the river to perform a cold bath, because it's a standard, not just for devotees, but anyone trying to achieve a goal, but especially for devotees. Sometimes people, they wonder, they say, especially people who are very much concerned with rasic things, they'll want to say, oh, rules and regulations. Prabhu, I am on the platform of Raganuga Bhakti. I am performing on the Rag Marg. I do not need rules and regulations. So I will sleep in every morning. I will eat McDonald's. I will play video games, because rules and regulations are for you lesser devotees on the Vaidhi Marg, following the Vidhi Marg. Sometimes people will think like this. But especially for those rasic devotees, well, actually for all devotees, we should not think it is only the rasic devotees who can lay claims to wishing to follow in the footsteps of the gopis. But the rasic devotees are the ones who make a big deal out of it. They're always going, Prahlad Maharaj, Dhruva Maharaj. Who are they? I only want to hear about the gopis. Forgetting that Srimati Radharani herself, in the form of Mahaprabhu, heard the pastimes of Dhruva Maharaj and Prahlad Maharaj hundreds of times from Gadadhar Pandit. So it's all just rascaldom. Srila Prabhupada, he once told some of his disciples, he heard they were reading only from the Ras Leela in Krishna book. Only they were reading from the esoteric parts of Chaitanya Charitamrita. And when Prabhupada found out, he didn't say, oh, you should read Krishna book differently. You should read CC differently. He said, you are all nonsense. You're all rascals. He chastised them heavily. And he said, you should not dive into these things so quickly. He was very, very heavy. He spoke very intense words. In fact, he spoke so intensely that one of the devotees there in that group, he had a bit of a hankar. And it hit him so hardly, he actually he left ISKCON because of how heavy the chastisement that Srila Prabhupada gave. But actually, better that somebody leaves spiritual life altogether than if they perform blasphemously or inappropriately enters into these higher things. Because if he leaves, he will come back. If he genuinely executed some devotional service, everyone will come back eventually. They have some taste now. They have some bhakti samskar. But if he stays and has some blasphemous ideas about the gopis, then that's much worse than that'll do much more damage. Much more damage than maybe pausing one's devotional life for a while. So anyways, so they will try to get into some, they'll say all of these things. Oh, I don't care for these things. Oh, Vaidhi Marg. I'm performing Rasik, Rag Marg devotion. But what did the gopis do in Katyaya Nivrata? When they were trying to attain Krishna by pleasing Durga, what did they do? They actually set the pattern by which all devotees should follow, actually. What did they do? They rose early in the morning. And who did they rise with? the other devotees. So there they had Vaishnav, the other gopis. So they rose with other devotees. So they had Vaishnav Sangha in their little brahmacharini ashram in Braj. They rose together early in the morning and they took cold bath. And during that bath, what did they do? They chanted the names of the Lord. They engaged in kirtan. So here we find this very basic program that Srila Prabhupada gave. Basic in the sense that it is simple, not basic in that it is not profound. This process, which maybe some people will say, oh, you know, I've outgrown that. Rules and regulations, Prabhu. Not for me. Actually, His Grace Madhavananda Prabhu, he'll make this example. Bhakta Bob, he first heard about Krishna 2 weeks ago, and now he's living in Radhakund, reciting the Radha Sahasranam. But he doesn't even know the first text of Upadeshamrita. He'll say, Vacho, what? I only know about Srimati Radharani's transcendental pastimes. What will he know? If one has not tamed Vachu Vegam, Manasa Krodha Vegam, then what will he know, if anything? He will only know his senses, because all that he experiences are his material senses. So, this wonderful process that has been given of waking up early in the association of the devotees, engaging in kirtan, engaging in worship of the holy name, this is very rasic, but it is also very relevant. Again, like so many things that Srila Prabhupada gave us, we merely need to execute it in the necessary mood of all those rasic things are far away, and eventually by the execution of them, naturally we will be brought to the rasic things. We should not buy into the propaganda. Now, Prabhu, you are ready. Now you are ready to jump into some higher thing. Before you were just doing the simple Prabhupada level stuff, but now I'm here to give you this rasic thing, that rasic thing. No, in Prabhupada's books, in the sadhana that Srila Prabhupada gave us, is everything. Only we must hear it explained by, what does Srila Prabhupada say? The qualification of the person who explains them. People who are less qualified will explain it as, oh, these things are lower, now you can level up. Now that I'm wearing Radhakund Tilak, and wearing Radhakund Tilak is fine, Srila Prabhupada wore it, but the way most people wear it is not fine. Srila Prabhupada said, you can wear Radhakund Tilak if you understand the significance of Radhakund. Most people wear Radhakund Tilak because they want to be like Indra Prabhu. Most people wear Radhakund Tilak, unfortunately, as a fashion statement. This is not the proper way to wear Radhakund Tilak. Radhakund Tilak is meant for a very specific purpose. If you have the sentiments in that direction. Srila Prabhupada said that is fine. If you have attachment for Radhakund, wear it. But most people wear it because they want to be the next Indra Prabhu. They want to be some great rock star Kirtaniya. Not that Indra Prabhu is a rock star Kirtaniya, but unfortunately, very many of the imitationists want to be. And unfortunately, very many of his imitationists, they are in this category of people who are very much, ooh, Rasik Prabhu. I'm doing Rasik things. I do not need to worry for rules and regulations. But Indra Prabhu, if he met the average Indra Prabhu fan, would have chastised them and rejected them. They're very eager to hear Indra Prabhu's kirtans. They're not very eager to hear his classes where he is chastising so heavily everyone. They're not so happy to study his life, where they find Indra Prabhu spent hours every day in study of Shastra, chanted 64 rounds. He engaged so intensely in deity dressing. It said the local Vrajvasis, Pandits and Pujaris who had grown up in Vraj generation after generation after generation. All their life they had grown up seeing the beautiful ways that the Lord can be dressed. And yet they would all come on one day of the week. They would always ask His Holiness Mahanidhi Swami. They would say, this day of the week, the Lord is dressed so beautifully. Who is dressing Him? They would always ask on this one day in particular. And this was the day that Indra Prabhu, it was his turn to do the seva of dressing the Supreme Lord. But they do not bother for this. They just say, oh, Rasik this, Radhakun Tilak. Cool tunes. Look at my harmonium playing. This is what they'll say. Mahanidhi Swami, he stressed this in the Disappearance Day offering to Indra Prabhu. On the actual day, the festival that was held at the actual time of his disappearance. He said, people are remembering Indra Prabhu today as a great kirtaniya. Or as a great musician, rather. But no, let us remember him as a great devotee. A great kirtaniya, yes, but a great devotee in every respect. So anyways, so they will say all of these things, but we find to shower, to bath early in the morning. This is a very important thing. A bit of a tangent to make that one point. But to bathe early in the morning, this is very important for us. And for all people really trying to get a goal. My spiritual master, His Holiness Sri Srimad Radha Govinda Das Goswami Maharaj, he once said that often we hear ISKCON is the kitchen religion. It is the food religion. But he said once he heard a very interesting description, and he said a description that he hopes catches on as well. One person said, oh, you're an ISKCON devotee. Because this person, he knew other ISKCON members. He said, you guys are the showering religion. Before you do anything, you're always taking a shower. And this is proper. Actually, in Mahabharata, it says that the Kshatriya, the nature of the Kshatriya is that if he is ever in a fight, he will stare at the enemy and he will either slay him or be killed by him, but he will never turn his back to him. In the same way, the nature of the Brahmin is that no matter what, he will never flinch before taking a cold bath. This is the Brahminical nature. It says this in Mahabharata. Anyway, so Yavakrita, he is now taking a bath early in the morning, executing his austerities, trying to attain this transcendental knowledge through tapasya. And he sees across the river an old man who's taking lumps of sand and throwing them into the river. And Yavakrita, he's very confused, but he performs his daily ablutions, wudu. He does his cleaning, and after performing all of that, he sees an old man still doing it. And he performs some tapasya. The old man, he's still going, pouring handful of sand. And Yavakrita, he thinks, okay, I've had enough. And he goes up to the old man and he says, dear old man, I'm seeing you're pouring so much sand into the river. Why are you doing this? And the old man, he says, I need to cross this river. I wish to go to the other side. There's a place I need to go. But I cannot swim, and there is no bridge. And so Yavakrita, he looks at him and he says, you can't swim and there is no bridge, but why are you pouring sand into the river? And the old man, he says, well, isn't it obvious? I'm building a bridge. I'm throwing the sand in there so I can build a bridge. And Yavakrita, he begins to laugh and laugh and laugh. He tries not to laugh out of respect that this is an elderly man who's clearly working very hard, but he laughs and laughs and tears are coming out of his eye, and he's thinking this. And then the old man, he looks at him and he says, sorry, what's so funny? The old man, he's very confused. He's saying, what's so funny? Yavakrita, he's saying, I'm sorry, but this is so much... I'm sorry, but you're a bit of a fool. You can't build a bridge by throwing sand into the river. And then the old man says, Yavakrita, I don't think you can laugh about people doing foolish endeavors. It is factually true that it is less foolish to try to build a bridge by pouring sand into a river than try to receive transcendental knowledge through tapasya or any other means besides from the lotus feet of the Guru. And Yavakrita, he became shocked to hear this. He thought, well, who are you? How do you know? How do you know me? You don't know who I am. But you do. You know this is why I'm here. You know my name. I never introduced myself. And at this point, the old man revealed himself to be Indra. Because Indra felt compassion for this poor, foolish Brahmin. So he decided to teach him this lesson. And so he taught him this lesson. And he said, go find a spiritual master, surrender to him, and learn the message of transcendental knowledge from him. So from this pastime we see that it is very necessary. It is very necessary to approach a spiritual master in order to obtain transcendental knowledge. And there is no higher transcendental knowledge than Srimad Bhagavatam. So we should understand this Bhagavatam from that person Bhagavat who has understood it. And so then, what is the nature of this Bhagavatam? We'll find in the next text, we hear in detail the explanation, the expansion of these 4 verses. And the next text doesn't have a purport, but it's a very famous one. We know, Shri Shuko Vacha, Atra Sargo Visargascha Stanam Poshanamutayaha Manvantare Shanukhatha Nirodho Muktirashrayaha. This is what the Bhagavatam is. Again, I was saying the Srimad Bhagavatam shows how we can understand the Bhagavatam, guru-disciple relationship. This is the means by which we can understand the Bhagavatam. The Bhagavatam also explains its very structure in 10 topics. Normally, in the Matsya Purana, in the Kurma Purana, we find another list of the topics of the Purana. But normally it's actually 5 topics. Bhagavatam, again, goes above and beyond and describes 10 topics that it covers. A regular Purana covers 5, normally. But Srimad Bhagavatam is no regular Purana. It is Srimad Bhagavatam Mahapurana. And so it is covering 10 topics. And of course, it is special among Puranas. We know the very famous text. Veda Puranam Kavyam Cha Prabhur Mitram Priyeva Cha Bodhayanti Hi Prabhus Trivrid Bhagavatam Punaha. We know this famous text. The Vedas, they speak like an authority figure, like a guru, like a father. The Puranas, they speak like a friend. And the Kavya, the poetry, they speak like a lover. But Srimad Bhagavatam speaks like all 3. So Srimad Bhagavatam is very special. It speaks in this very special way. We know the Vedas, they speak very, stuffily almost. They're speaking authoritatively, very philosophically, very systematically. Like this they speak. And we know the Puranas, they speak with very many sweet stories like a friend. Very friendly, very approachable, just like a friend. The Vedas are not so approachable, like an authority figure. And the Kavya, the poetry, we know. Even from the poetry we sing Gurvashtakam like this. They speak so emotionally, so aesthetically. Again, like a lover. But Bhagavatam does all 3. It speaks like this. And what does it speak of? It speaks of these 10 topics. I'll quickly go through them and then we'll wrap up. Sarga, the initial creation. And so there's actually quite a few creations which are discussed in this text. There's 4 or 5 or so that discuss the nature of the material world. So we'll find Sargo, Sargaha, the initial creation. This is the first creation we find. When all of the planetary creation, it all comes out from Vishnu. It all expands out. Then we find Visarga. The word Vi normally means on top of, extra. So the secondary creation. When Brahma takes all of these shells, so all of the shells which expand out from Mahavishnu, Garbhodakashayi Vishnu enters into them and he sweats. And then after sweating, Brahma appears. And they all get assembled. This is the secondary creation. And from the secondary creation, we know all the jivas are present. They're present on the stem of the lotus leaf, on the lotus flower that Brahma appears on. Why? Because all their desires must be present in order for Brahma to assemble the material world. Because the material world is not assembled for the Lord to satisfy his sense gratification. It's assembled for the jivas to satisfy their sense gratification. So Brahma assembles it. But then we find the third creation, which is mentioned a little later, Uttayaha, the creative potency, the creative impetus. Often it's also just used to just describe sex desire. So this is the third creation, because this is the creation that human beings have when they enter, or all living entities have, when they enter. So we have the grand creation of Mahavishnu. Then we have the localized creation of Brahma. And then after the localized creation of Brahma, what do we have? we have then the very localized creation of the various living entities. And as the various living entities, as they continue with their localized creation, we have the passage of time. So this is the fourth aspect describing the material universe, which is the manvantaras. We know the great kings residing over each era. They represent the passing of time. We know we divide time into who the Manu is. So like this, the passing of time of these three creations is measured in terms of the Manus. So therefore we find this fourth aspect describing material nature. And then the last aspect of material nature is Nirodha. Nirodha, we find, Srila Prabhupada, he renders it as going back home, back to Godhead. And this is true. But literally it means the wrapping up of the material creation. So it can mean both, of course, because when we wrap up the nature of the material creation, we go back home, back to Godhead. We leave this material creation. Nirodha can also mean the dissolution, the destruction of this material world before it goes into an unmanifest state. So here we find a description of all of these things, all of these various elements of the material world. Because again, everything material or spiritual is discussed in this Bhagavatam, which is why it is Vaishnavanam Priyam. It is the favorite among the devotees. Sometimes we take this Vaishnavanam Priyam to be descriptive. It is describing that the devotees love the Bhagavatam. But if we do not love the Bhagavatam, if it is not our favorite text, then we should also take this as prescriptive, as an injunction. If it is not our favorite and we wish to become Vaishnavas, then in order for us to become Vaishnavas, the Bhagavatam must become our favorite. It must become our favorite of all texts. If we wish to become Vaishnavas, we must have love of Bhagavatam. And if we do not have love of Bhagavatam, we are not Vaishnavas. So, if we have the love for Bhagavatam, then we can take it as a description of the Vaishnavas. But if we do not have love for Bhagavatam, then we should understand if I want to become Vaishnava, I should develop taste and love for Srimad Bhagavatam. So, anyways, so this Bhagavatam, it's describing all of these things. And then the remaining topics are a bit more, and then of course the sthanam, which is also material, in a sense. It's describing the various planetary systems. And we know Bhagavatam, 5th canto especially, a headache for most of us. 5th canto is wonderful. We should always relish so much great knowledge in there. It's not that we must neglect the knowledge of the planetary systems. But deep knowledge is not so much needed. There's one purport where Srila Prabhupada doesn't even translate it into English. He just writes it in Sanskrit. And he says, anyone interested can translate the Sanskrit for themselves. So we understand deep knowledge of the 5th canto is not so much needed. But knowledge of the 5th canto is needed. Otherwise, why would Srila Prabhupada want to establish this TOVP? And I'll come back to planetary systems in a second. And then, of course, there's Poshanam, the protection of the Lord. We find this most especially in 7th canto with Prahlad Maharaj. There's Poshanam, and then there's Isha Anukattaha, the science of the Godhead. We find this throughout Bhagavatam, 3rd canto, 11th canto, all the time. 7th canto, every canto is discussing the science of God, the nature of reality in relation to Krishna and the relation of a devotional service to Krishna. So we'll find all of these things. Then Mukti Liberation. Of course, we should not understand Mukti meaning impersonal liberation. Here it means Sayujya, Sarupya, Salokya, like this. Not Sayujya, Sarupya, Salokya, like that. It's referring to these forms of liberation, Vaishnav liberation. The forms of liberation that don't make the ears of Sarvabhaum Bhattacharya bleed when he has to recite Srimad Bhagavatam. And then, finally, there's Ashraya, the Samam Bonam. And what is the Samam Bonam? We also know the Samam Bonam is the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. And what is the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam? But the beautiful pastimes of Krishna. The Ashraya is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But it is more than that. It is the Supreme Personality of Godhead manifesting his pastimes in Vraj with all of his devotees. This is the Samam Bonam. And this is the main point of the Bhagavatam. Actually, all these other 9 topics are only there so that one can appreciate the Samam Bonam. Srila Prabhupada has said this. All our previous acharyas have said this. The actual essence of the Srimad Bhagavatam is Vraj Leela with Krishna. Oh, very rasic. But we should understand, these 9 topics are not just there so that somebody can realize, oh, actually I only need to bother about the Ashrayaha, and then just read that. Because otherwise, Shukadev Goswami would only have spoken the 10th canto. All of these 9 topics are directly related to the Summum Bonum because they allow one to approach it, to understand it. People will wonder, why the planetary systems? This Bhagavatam is meant to be the highest transcendental knowledge. Why am I hearing about the distance between the sun and the moon? Srila Prabhupada would often say, the sun is closer than the moon. And people would say, Prabhupada, how can we understand this? What is the proof? And Prabhupada would say, well, Sunday comes before Monday. Therefore, the sun is closer than the moon. Transcendental logic. I'm still not sure exactly how Prabhupada meant to prove that. But sweet response. Anyways, we have many ways of understanding the relation of the planetary systems, but I don't have time to get into them. But what does this have to do with this? Well, actually, and some people will say, the sun is going around the earth. What does this have to do with Vraj Leela? What does this have to do with Krishna stealing butter? What does this have to do with Krishna running around with the gopas and the gopis? What does this have to do with anything? But we must understand, everything in Bhagavatam is related to the Summum Bonum, directly or indirectly. Everything is related to Krishna. Everything is related to his pastimes. People will look at the 5th canto and they'll say, see, the sun goes around the earth. But that is not the point of the 5th canto. The 5th canto is not there to smash the scientists' understanding of cosmology, as much as it can be used to do so, and will be used to do so when the TOVP is complete. But this is not the main point of the 5th canto of Bhagavatam. The 5th canto of Bhagavatam is not there to prove that the earth moves around the sun, or that the sun moves around the earth. The 5th canto of Bhagavatam is there to show that all reality revolves around Krishna. It is to destroy our understanding of reality which revolves around us, and to show an understanding of reality which revolves around the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And when we understand the world we dwell in as the world that revolves around Krishna, we will be able to destroy the ahankar, which thinks ourselves to be the center of reality. And when we destroy that ahankar, we are more and more able to enter into the topic of the Summum Bonum. Same if we understand the creation. If we understand the Visarga, if we understand the Sarga, we don't think ourselves to be some great gods who can do such great things. We will be humbled by this creation around us. And through that humility, we will be able to understand who is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. By being able to understand the difference between Sarga and Visarga, we will understand the difference between spiritual and material realities, and we will not fall into the sahajiya tendency. By understanding the Uttayaha, we will directly understand how to curtail the sexual desire which can so much pervert people who try to understand these 10th canto pastimes. By understanding Poshanam, Isha Anukataha, by understanding the science of Godhead. Because maybe we won't necessarily understand all the natures of Shaktis and all, if we just run into the pastimes. But if we understand these beforehand, we will be able to interpret appropriately the pastimes of the 10th canto. The Summum Bonum. So all of these topics here, they are there, and they're all worshipful, and they're all great, and this is the means by which we should interpret Bhagavatam. Bhagavatam has given us its structure, and if I had time, I would have gone through how they relate. But we should understand these are all there, so we can approach that Summum Bonum. That Summum Bonum, which is already there.